Good morning, everybody, and good morning to those of you who are in the chamber and online for the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee meeting of Tuesday, the 18th of November 2025, and particularly welcome to anybody who may be watching us either live or in the near future. I hope you find the meeting useful, and the purpose of it is to really explore the reports and scrutinise what's in front of us to understand better, and very substantially to do that on behalf of our residents and our businesses who will, I'm sure, be interested to know what lies behind some of the reports that are in front of us just now. If I could just make a couple of preliminary comments. We're here on a Tuesday morning after a weekend that has been really devastating to a lot of people living in different parts of the county, but the very heart of the problems, the flooding problems, have been in Monmouth and Scanfraith, and as well as in parts of Abergavenny and other spots around the county. And no matter if it's one, two, or multiple people, if you find your property flooded, it's a devastating thing. So I just wanted to say that we're meeting as usual because the work of the council needs to go on, but also to recognise while we're doing that there are so many people who are rebuilding their homes and rebuilding their businesses, and the council, I'm sure, will be doing everything it can possibly do to make sure that it supports the efforts. Could I also just extend thanks to the very many officers and councillors who have been extremely busy over the course of the last 3 days, really, and both in terms of lending direct support, physical support, as well as coordinating support. And I know from going around some residents yesterday, they were very grateful for the efforts that Monmouthshire County Council has done, along with the other emergency services. So before we start the meeting proper, I just wanted to register that, and that our heads are significantly with all those people who are right now working to rebuild their lives and their businesses. So with that in mind, I would also be asking our committee, we're going to try and be a little bit more expeditious than we sometimes are in this meeting, and aim to finish by midday. And I know the committee members are supportive of that, because I know that officers and councillors have, in many cases, got other priorities in these few days. So thanks for everybody's support for that approach that we take today. And for those officers who may need to dive out because of urgent calls, we completely get that. And thanks indeed for being here this morning. So just moving on to the agenda itself, we have apologies from Councillor Garrett, I believe, and...
Yes, Councillor Garrett, Cabinet Member Sandals as well, and also our new co-opted member, Claire Werrett.
Thank you, Robert. Any declarations of interest? I don't see any, and I'm not notified of any, so we'll move on to the public open forum. Is there any approach that we have?
No one today, Chair.
So we're going to move straight into item 4 on the agenda, which is the financial update on 25-26 revenue budget. And it has important information, which I'm sure we'll want to get some better clarification about a few points. But we welcome Councillor Callard, the Cabinet Member. And Councillor Callard, I don't know if you wanted to offer any preliminary comments before moving into anything Jonathan might want to raise, and any questions.
Yeah, I've got a short introduction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also firstly just like to associate myself with the comments of the Chair on the flooding that we saw over the weekend. Our thoughts are with those households and businesses that have been affected, and hopefully the recovery can be swift. The report I'm presenting to the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee today is the 2025-2026 Revenue Budget Financial Update, and it provides a clear and timely overview of our current financial position, the progress made since the first forecast of the year, and the key risks and challenges that remain ahead. At the outset, I'm pleased to report a forecast underspend of £29,000 at Update 2, a marked improvement of 1.3 million since our initial position earlier in the year, and this represents a full reversal of the previously projected £533,000 overspend and has allowed us to restore £761,000 of contingency back into the budget. This turnaround is positive and a welcome development, reflecting strengthened financial management and the effective use of grant funding, particularly within social care, where the maximisation of grant income has been a key factor in improving the forecast. While this favourable movement demonstrates encouraging progress, it's important to recognise the wider financial environment in which we're operating. Demand for high-cost services, especially adults and children's social care and additional learning needs, remains volatile. Inflationary pressures continue to exceed budget assumptions, and we're seeing a slight decline in debt recovery rates, particularly within council tax and social care. These ongoing factors pose real challenges to our financial resilience. The report also highlights pressures within schools, where the cumulative reserves deficit is forecast to increase to just over £7 million by year end. 18 of our 35 schools are expected to be in deficit, and recovery plans are now required to ensure corrective action is progressed. Despite these challenges, there are several areas of operational strength contributing to our improved position. Underspends within waste, decarbonisation and other service areas, alongside continued vacancy management and improved council tax collection, have helped offset pressures elsewhere in the system. The capital programme remains broadly on track, with expenditure forecast at £59.79 million and only a minor variance reported. As we move forward, the focus remains firmly on financial discipline, delivering planned savings and addressing underlying cost pressures, many of which have the potential to repeat into 2026-2027 if not fully resolved. Our task is not just to balance this year's budget, but to strengthen the Council's long-term financial sustainability. This update sets out both the progress achieved and the work that still lies ahead, and I look forward to the scrutiny and challenge of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. Jonathan, did you want to add anything to the key points in the report, and then we'll move on to questions from the members? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Davis, Head of Finance. I think Councillor Callard has covered that quite well. I think naturally I'll fall back on perhaps some of the risks that we still carry. This is update 2, so we're still fairly early in the year when this forecast is brought together. It's pleasing that we've been able to restate some of our budget contingency. I think the events over the weekend have probably shown why such a contingency is needed, and it's going to be an important tool as we go forward in managing some of the impact of those events. I think the important point to note within the report is that there are still underlying cost pressures within some of our services. We are mitigating those through various measures. They do tend to be quite one-off in nature, so that's one-off income, staff vacancies that are gradually being filled, and also we have annually allocated grants where we have very little certainty over the quantum of those as we move forward. So those are the risks that we're carrying through the next 6 months and into the next budgetary process for next year that we need to be cognizant of. The other risk, and I think where a lot of financial focus is going at the moment, is within schools, and I think naturally the figures in the report show that that deteriorating position from update 1 to update 2, that a lot of effort is now going into to tackle. There's a lot within that, and we're working closely with schools of concern to manage those budget recovery plans over the periods that we've agreed with them. But nevertheless, this is a continuing focus for us now, because as we note, it does reduce our financial resilience as we carry those deficits on our balance sheet. So a key focus for us over the next, what is 5 or 6 months now of the financial year and for the foreseeable period. But I think I'll leave it there, Chair. I think that hopefully the report is self-explanatory and leads us into some scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we'll open to questions now from members of the committee. So I see Councillor Strong with your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and both for that report. There's a reference in the report to interest rates being higher than expected, and that being, I assume, a cost pressure. As I understand it, interest rates are projected to probably even likely to be coming down in the near future. How big an impact would that have, or possibly have, on our finances over the next few months?
Jonathan, did you want to try picking that up?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the question. It's probably fair to say that I think any changes that we see now over the next coming period will have minimal effect on the remaining 5 or 6 months of the financial year. I think naturally we will have forecast any remaining reduction in interest rate into our plans for the rest of the year. We're perhaps expecting one further rate cut to bank rate, but whilst that does have an impact, the more important measure for us is our cost of borrowing, and that is linked to gilt yields, and they don't necessarily have a direct impact with any changes in bank rate. As we've seen over recent weeks, there's been upward pressure on those gilt rates for various reasons economically that have had an impact. And it's that is probably the most important factor to us as a net borrower, as an authority. So we've obviously got a longer term approach to our treasury management, and a lot of those risks will be mitigated through long-term borrowing at fixed rates. So it's only the smaller quantum of borrowing that we take on a short-term basis that would have a direct impact from any changes over the coming months. So relatively comfortable that that will have minimal impact through the remainder of the year.
Councillor Strong, were you content with that?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that distinction between interest rates and gilt yield is very interesting to hear. I'm assuming that from your answer that the council takes a pretty cautious approach to its borrowing throughout those long-term fixed rates. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. And I don't know, Jonathan, if you would say the word cautious is the approach that you would use to describe our approach. And
I think it's all about balance, Chair. I think the last going off 70% of our borrowing is at fixed longer term rates, and that gives us a degree of balance of risk that we can manage. What we don't want to be in a position of is having 100%, because any positive reduction in rates then won't benefit us. But similarly, we don't want to be at the other end of the scale where we're exposed to very short-term variation in rates. So it is all about that balance, which is set out in our Treasury strategy and approved by full council.
Thank you. So I'm looking at questions, and Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ben and Jonathan. There are 18 schools are forecast to be in deficit by March 26. So what specific interventions are being taken with the most at-risk schools? And by when do you expect the number of schools in deficit to reduce rather than rise? sort of and in that question, given the wide variation in financial performance within schools, what is the council doing to tackle structural deficits rather than just in-year overspends? Because that, as we're flagging up, it seems to be of major concern, the deficit in schools. On sort of reserves and capitalisation and our financial resilience as a council, this council has the lowest reserve cover in Wales. And what would you consider is the minimum safe level of usable reserves that officers believe the authority must hold to remain financially resilient? And the last question, please. Budget modelling includes multiple assumptions about NI contributions, utilities, commission care, rising costs, etc. You know, what would you say is the highest risk category, and what is the mitigation plan if it moves, ever adversely? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckler. So, Councillor Canada, did you want to come in on that first of all?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the questions, Councillor Buckler. I'll go through the questions in turn, and I may well bring. We've got Nikki Wellington in the chamber with us, who may be able to shed a little bit more light on the situation with the schools. I think you're right in your question to separate that issue of a structural deficit with an in-year operating deficit. We've got, as you mentioned, 18 schools in a deficit position at the moment. We need to get those schools onto a stable financial footing by working with the schools. I think the first step of that is actually addressing that in-year deficit. The £7 million that we've got on our books at the moment is a cumulative deficit. And for me, really, if we can get to a position of netting out our schools' budgets year on year, so that number's not growing, then that's really the first step. And then we can look over a longer period of time to try and bring that cumulative deficit down. It's something that we have been meeting with the schools about. You'll see from the report that the Abergavenny cluster and the it's in there as special in the report, but it's our pupil referral service are the two biggest pressures, and in fact make up 4.7, nearly 4.8 million pounds of that £7 million cumulative deficit. We're working with those schools to address recovery plans. It is going to be over an extended period of time, because I'm very conscious that we need, the priority is making sure that the school is able to deliver the best education it can, and what we don't want is any rapid changes within those schools to address this, causing any negative outcomes within the schools and within the education environment. So we're working with the schools in order to get them onto a more stable financial footing. My view is, it needs approaching from both sides, as in we need to increase the funding to our schools if we can. We did that last year. Currently, we're working towards next year's budget. So increase funding where possible, and also to ask the schools, where there are savings that can be made, for those savings that can be made. There's specific issues in the pupil referral unit, which, as I mentioned, carries a significant burden with regards to increased demand for the services there. So we've had a higher number of pupils move over to that service in the last few years. And because of the way the funding system works, with the funding that those pupils, that comes with the pupil and moves with the pupil, it doesn't carry an overhead burden with it. So what it's resulted is kind of like an outsized cost pressure on the pupil referral service. It's something that we're working at the moment to address. And it is, as you mentioned, for me, it's probably the most concerning area of the council's finance at the moment, and I'm very keen for us to work to get it on a more stable financial footing. John, Nikki, did you want to come into anything about schools?
Yeah, thank you. Nikki Wellington, Support Services Manager. I think Councillor Callard's covered most of the points, but just to add to that, we were aware that the situation with school deficits would get worse before it gets better. With schools, obviously, we were working to an academic year rather than to a financial year. So where there are staff reductions, they normally happen 5 months into the financial year, so from the 1st of September. So we have modelled that through, so we know that the risks are there. As Councillor Callard mentioned, we've got schools with recovery plans, and we're holding them to account. And those schools with significant balances have been to meet with both Cabinet Member for Resources and Education to agree those plans. And then, as I said, we work with them on a monthly basis. Just to remind everyone, obviously, there was the £1 million investment in schools last year, so that has obviously gone to help address some of those balances. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. And John, you may want to add some comments just on how we handle this. The next agenda item, which is the medium-term report, it would be inevitable, I think, that this issue sort of leaches into that. So we may find our questions moving into that before we get to the paper, which is absolutely fine because it's difficult to just look at this on a one-year basis. And Nikki, I very well remember you telling us about 6 months ago that your expectation is that it would get worse before it gets better. So, your comment is absolutely appropriate. You told the committee that very thing. John, any additional comments?
Thank you, Jay. I'm happy to move on to the second and third questions, if that's...
Yeah, so we were looking at the minimum safe usable resources and the budget modelling high-risk areas.
Chair, could I just very quickly come in?
Please do. Yeah,
Councillor Callard. You mentioned, Councillor Callard, that you're looking for increased funding. What sources are you looking at?
Well, it will predominantly come from increases within our revenue budget, us allocating funding internally. Last year, we were able to allocate an additional £1 million on top of pay pressures for our schools, which I think was very welcome with the conversations I had with the schools. Coming into budget for 2026, 2027, we'll also be looking within our budget to see what we can do to support, the schools in Monmouthshire.
John, did you want to pick up on these other 2 points?
Thank you, Chair. So I think coming on to the second point, Councillor Buckler, around reserves cover, and you're right to outline that the Audit Wales report from, I think it was around about 18 months, 2 years ago, identified that we were at the lower end of reserve cover per head of population. And it's something that was identified as a risk within our budget planning framework for both 25-26, this financial year, and as we go into 26-27. I think firstly there's an important distinction here between what we deem earmarked reserves and what we deem more emergency immediate risk cover reserves. So we hold a council fund which is there to meet more immediate pressures and emergency pressures coming forward should the need arise. And the medium-term financial strategy outlined that needed to be at 5% of our net revenue budget. So that is the minimum level that we were aiming to hold as cover. And we have done that through both last financial year and coming into this financial year and holding that level of immediate cover. And that's an important tool for us to manage those risks that we see. When we then look at earmarked reserves, those are the more strategic use reserves that we'll have that allow us to invest, I guess, in the more medium term around redesign of services, invest to save schemes where investment upfront will deliver hopefully savings over the longer term. it is those I would deem that are at a lower level than we would like moving forward, and where our budget strategy is trying to introduce some further top-up of those reserves as we move forward. By putting a budget contingency in, if all things remain equal and we don't use that budget contingency, that effectively gives us an ability to top up those reserves as we move forward. But there's lots of things that have to play out to enable that to happen. So, I think we're aware that those reserves are at a lower level than we would like. That has developed for a multitude of reasons. I think we've seen a gradual use of reserves over the past probably 10 to 15 years from those periods of challenging funding settlements that we've had over that time. But I think that the budget strategy was clear, both for this year and it will be for 26-27, that there is a need to get us back to a more sustainable level within those reserves moving forward.
Okay, and John, did you want to pick up on the fourth point, which is about budget modelling and the highest areas of risk and whatever mitigation?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it links in a little bit to probably the next report that we'll be looking through as well. But I think the answer to this is probably that it varies depending on the challenges we're facing as an authority. I think what we've seen over the past 3 to 4 financial years is the level of service demand be probably the key budget assumption that we've had to manage. That has outweighed at times the more traditional high-risk assumptions around pay, around income generation, and around inflation. So it's been that level of service demand, additional service demand that's come in. We've seen it in social care. We've seen it in homelessness. We've seen it in additional learning needs within our schools cohorts. Those post-pandemic have been quite acute in terms of the levels of additional demand that we've had to accommodate within the budget setting. That probably remains through the next coming budget period. So I think the next paper will talk around that level of service demand and the assumption around that and how important that is on our modelling and budget gap that we're seeing for next year. Of course, the others remain a consideration. Pay, over half of our budget is given to pay costs. So any change in that is, of course, going to be an important consideration and will affect us considerably. And the other, probably worth mentioning, is around our income. So the settlement we get through Welsh Government grant, the assumption that we make around that is an important one. It accounts for over 60% of our income as an authority, and clearly just even a 0.5% change of that, shifts the dial quite considerably. So, there's a whole host of assumptions that we've talked about in the coming paper, but we have to be flexible and shift as we move through the budget process because these figures don't stand still. They change and are quite dynamic. So hopefully that covers probably where our key focus is at the moment, Councillor.
Thanks, John. And Councillor Buckler, any brief additional comment that you may have?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm going to move on to Councillor Pavia. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Social care has moved on from a projective overspend to the small underspend, which on the face of it looks positive, but I think you, Chair, sort of prefaced it. It does seem to be heavily dependent on grants and assumptions around practice change. while demand and placement numbers are still rising. And I suppose as a committee, we need to satisfy ourselves that that position is structurally sound. Just in terms of the Welsh Government grant, the Pathways of Care Transformation Grant, I think there's an expectation that focus is going to be for us as a local authority to spend on supporting hospital discharge, community prevention, and early intervention. And I suppose the question is, whilst there's always strings in relation to accountability and reporting mechanisms for grants, I suppose just to understand what the expectations are coming from ministers and civil servants around any additionality of service for that. Is there an expectation that we need to deliver above and beyond what we're already doing, or is it realistically just covering off the shortfall and just to maintain the current level of service that we've already got? The second question is in relation to the practice change, and in the report we see some small proportion of saving which has been evidenced so far. So this was what is the plan and timescale for robustly evidencing the saving from the whole practice change programme, and what will you do if the full amount can't be achieved? And finally, Chair, just in relation to schools budgets, and we've said about the challenge because it's sitting on the council's own balance sheet and it affects our financial resilience. I suppose to understand what are the red line triggers at which we will intervene more directly into a school's financial management, more than just the sort of supporting and monitoring that we're doing at the moment with the sign-off of their recovery plans. What will be the sort of red line where we're going to have to go in and take over in that regard and deal with the school's financial deficit for them? And are there any schools that are hitting those thresholds or near those thresholds? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavia, and some important questions there. So, John, did you want to start with are we just covering the shortfall in grants? Or?
Thank you, Chair. I think I can probably hopefully line up someone better placed to talk on all three of these. And I think, the very valid questions, Councillor Pavia. I think on the pathways for care, if that's okay, Chair, I'll hand over to either Tyrone or Jane Rogers, who are in the chamber. And I think latterly on the schools question and our ability to make further changes, I think we've got Will McLean in the chamber as well. So if that's okay, Chair, I'll hand over to them.
Let's do that. Who wants to go first? Jane?
Thank you very much, Chair. Jane Rogers, Strategic Director for Social Care and Health. So just to pick up on the first question regarding the Pathways of Care Transformation Grant and the monitoring requirements that are in place for that. There are quarterly monitoring requirements set against the grants, and we have face-to-face meetings with the colleague from Welsh Government who is responsible for administering the grants. The core underlying question, as I understood it, was whether there is an expectation about additionality or whether that really is about doing more of the same around hospital discharge. I think you recognise, Councillor Pavia, that the Pathways of Care Transformation Grant was a grant that was issued directly to local authorities, that was issued to support capacity right across the system. So although the emphasis of the grant is delivering increased hospital discharge, or the emphasis of the grant is around hospital discharge, and it's undeniable that there is going to be pressure at that particular point within the social care and health system, and the expectation is that we continue to make good progress in effecting timely discharges. There is a wider recognition that you can only achieve good discharges, hospital discharges, and increase hospital flow if we have a whole system capacity. So the grant does look across the whole system, and we report across the whole system, right from social care front door work through to reablement work, and then onwards into hospital flow and hospital discharge. So it's an element of both. There is a sense that there will be increased emphasis on achieving good and timely and safe hospital discharges, with a recognition that to do that, the grant needs to support the wider capacity across the whole system. In terms of the second question, we had allocated some savings to practice change, which members will recall is linked to our review of existing social care packages. We continue to make good progress in effecting the reviews. What we haven't done yet is done the piece of work to draw down the savings against them, although some savings will be already represented in the progress we've made against the overall position at month 6 for adult social care. So we're confident that those savings are in there. We just haven't represented them separately as the piece of work as opposed to the overall position at the bottom line. So thank you, Chair. I hope that's answered the questions.
Thank you, Jane. And on the third question of what red line triggers on schools, Will, did you want to pick that one up?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Pavia. Will McLean, I'm the Strategic Director for Children, Learning Skills and the Economy. So Councillor Pavia is absolutely right that there are points where we will look to become more involved in schools, where we feel that the budget is a significant risk. Ordinarily and importantly, we want to work closely with our schools. We want our team internally to work to support, to closely monitor and to provide that advice to schools, remembering that for all of our schools, they have a delegated budget that is the responsibility of the governing body. However, if there were to come a point in time where we felt that the school had lost the ability to manage its budget, that the control environment was not sufficiently robust within the school, or that the plans were not being executed as had been agreed through their budget recovery plans, at those points, I think it would be a different discussion between myself, John Davis leading finance, and Peter Davis in terms of his role as our Section 151 officer. The process by which we then become engaged with the schools is predicated under the School Standards Act, and that would involve the issuing of a warning notice and potentially us taking the delegation of the budget back, something we have done on one occasion in my tenure as the Director for Education in Monmouthshire. There are no schools in that position at the moment. There is one school we are working very, very closely with at the moment. Well, actually, there are two, kind of a school and a setting. So, as mentioned earlier, and is clear from the papers, we've been working very closely with the Pupil Referral Service to manage its position and with King Henry VIII. Okay.
Thank you, Will, and that's very helpful and very clear. Paul, Councillor Pavia, were there any brief follow-ups that you had to that?
Yeah, just briefly on Jane Rogers' first response. I suppose it's and you're absolutely right, Jane, in terms of that sort of complete whole systems approach. But I suppose it's understanding from Welsh Government's point of view and from potentially Health Board's point of view that there's not an expectation that, well, here's more money, you can deliver more work, more outcomes, when in fact, you know, the system is already stretched and a lot of that money is just going to be put into the system just to maintain what we've got, rather than delivering more and more and keeping that wheel, you know, that wheel of demand management spinning around faster and faster. So I suppose the expectation, just understanding that they realise this is not going to be, you know, the silver bullet to significantly change in hospital discharge over this winter. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavia, and points well made. I'm going to move on to Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody. My concern is around schools again, and following on from Councillor Buckler, and perhaps delving into the second document. But it's been suggested that if the schools cannot deliver against their plans, then the authority would take over, almost as if it's a management issue. I wonder how much it would be a management issue, and maybe it's, as Councillor Callard has said earlier, and others, it's about pupil referral services and other things which cannot be helped. Just they are what they are type situation. So my first question is, what does it actually mean for schools in the classroom? What differences? What are these plans going to be doing? Can you give some sort of insight, Will, or others, to what that means, actually in the classroom? And something else I've noticed in this, and we're going to talk about the health and safety document after, and we've done the voucher SV, and we've done lots of other discussions, education report the end of last year, school year. And it seems like there's a thread going on here, and it's about behaviour in schools, and it's about young people. So are we getting to the root cause? So if we're getting more pupil referral service requests, then do we need more social emotional learning? Do we need more, which I've been trying to follow up a number of times, but do we need more, get to the root cause and change behaviour, change young people's understanding of themselves and the change they're going through, so that they don't get to the stage where they need the support, the ELSA or pupil referral? So I'm seeing a thread here, and I think it's going to come out in a lot of areas, and I think we really need to think about the root cause and how we change that. But that's one reason for schools, but mainly, how does this impact the children in the classroom, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Will, did you want to pick that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, so with regards to your first part of your question, Councillor Bond, in terms of getting to the root cause of needs, I think, it's been said already this morning, since the pandemic, and there has been a very significant change in the presentations that we're seeing in school, and there has been significant demands on those services that support children, both with additional learning needs and those who are experiencing periods whereby their emotional well-being needs greater support. In terms of the pupil referral service, I think just for members' awareness, the pupil referral service is actually made up really of three quite distinct services. So there's the PRU aspect, the pupil referral unit. That is for those children traditionally it used to be in years 10 and 11. It's a much broader piece now from years 7 to 11, children who are at risk or who had been permanently excluded from a mainstream school. Those numbers have grown significantly but are holding relatively stable at the moment. The second part is EOTIS for those children who have been educated other than at school, where that pre-pandemic, in my experience, would have been probably a handful of children who were, very tragically experiencing things like childhood cancers or had really significant injuries, car accidents, those types of things, and were unable to attend school. We're now seeing very, very significant growth in that area with regards to high levels of anxiety and children who simply cannot attend school for that reason. The third part of the PRS's provision we refer to as ALN Bespoke, and those are a very small group of learners, but they're a very impactful group of learners. Those are children who we have placed in out-of-county special schools, but those out-of-county special schools have come to us and said we cannot meet this child's needs anymore. So we have had to take them back into MCC and provide with very, very bespoke curriculum offer for them to allow them to maintain their education. So the PRS is a highly dynamic service which is responding to very, very significant needs within a relatively small group of pupils, but they are a group of pupils with very, very significant needs in that area. In terms of the support that we're able to offer across mainstream schooling, you've mentioned ELSA, the Emotional Literacy Support Assistants. They're hugely important. We retain our investment and schools maintain their investment in those learners. I think honestly, my reflection is I don't think we will ever get back to a position where we were previously, and say with any level of confidence that things are now as they were and we don't need those supports, and that can fall away, and that will make our finances more stable and so on. What we're seeing is a continuing pattern of need. In fact, if my colleague Dr. Moana Wagstaff was with us today, she would be indicating that we're seeing levels of need becoming ever more present in younger children throughout the period of time. So I suspect it will be something which we continue to see as an aspect of our schooling system. It leads to other costs. So it leads to costs for us in terms of the provision for ALN and so on, which sit outside the schools. And those are costs which, again, we've seen growth in our budgets on a year-on-year basis as we transition from the old ALN system into the new system and the two different types of individual development plans. So there's a huge amount of work in that area. The bottom line with regards to budget recovery and the impact on schools is one which is managed by governing bodies. So I don't have a direct line in terms of what those governing bodies make those decisions with and how they decide on what they need to do to manage their budget within the parameters that they've been afforded. Sometimes, and this is not a point of any level of comfort, sometimes that can involve reductions in staff, and that is one of the consequences of that piece. It's a hugely challenging period of time for all schools and for all education authorities across Wales, and we're seeing similar patterns to what we described and seen today in Monmouthshire in the other 21 local authorities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Will. And it's some really sobering points that you're making there, with a lot of experience behind them. So I appreciate your perspective on it. I suppose part of the consideration that local authorities and beyond will need to make is the society need to make adjustments in its approaches more than schools alone, because these are such huge issues. Councillor Bond, did you have any follow-up briefly on those points?
Yeah, understand. Thank you very much, Will. My only point would be that ELSA and everything else is reactive rather than proactive and preventative, as you, I know you know. So we need to be working more on stopping the flying start, the sure start, the helping young people before they get into positions where they can't regulate their emotions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Points really well made, and obviously taking us to even, obviously preschool and the development of the child preschool. So very, very challenging questions, but thank you for raising them. I see Councillor Howells finally with your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers. Yeah, just a couple of points for me. One on the passenger transport, the overspend of £334,000 there. I presume that's on the unsafe routes, or is that entirely on the unsafe routes, or have other areas been identified in that overspend? And also, it's good to see that street lighting is on budget. However, I did recall reading that we are experimenting with dimmable technology, and I was wondering if that's providing any savings, and if it is it being rolled out throughout the county? I know there's quite a large expenditure on street lighting. I saw in 22-23 we were spending £420,000 on street lighting. I do previously think we had a dark skies. I think certainly in us we had a period that we were turning the lights off completely from midnight, and I don't know if there was a reason for that being reversed, possibly for safety or aspects. But yeah, I was just wondering if that's still been looked at, the dimmable technology. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. And Councillor Callard, did you want to pick up on the first of those passenger transport school?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, that I think you're right there, Councillor Howells, to highlight the that overspend. it is mainly to do with the identifying of more unsafe routes to school, and therefore, as we committed to do during the review process, to put the passenger transport back into place. On the night sky, it was before this council. It was before I was a councillor where we had the lights going off at midnight. My understanding is it was reversed for safety reasons. I had a number of occasions walking back from the pub, maybe later than I should have done, using my phone as a torch. So I do understand that, while it did have benefits for the night sky, I think public safety concerns outweighed those. I don't have an answer to the dimmable lights, but if it's okay, I can look into it and ask that you get a written response.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, it would be. I've had a resident ask me why we are sort of keeping our lights open, especially with the Dark Skies initiative that's out there and the night pollution that's created. So for our wildlife, etc., it's very harmful. So if there is technology and we are using it, then if it's providing savings as well, that'd be great. Thanks.
The classic question of pubs against wildlife raises its head again. But thanks, it's a really interesting point, and I'll be interested to see the reply when it comes through. If I may, just a couple of quick ones. The NIC, the National Insurance shortfall, is about 760,000, which is a shortfall against what we, it seems to me, quite properly assumed would be fully funded in terms of the National Insurance increase. Is that does that exclude schools? So that's purely for MCC non-schools. Would you be able to confirm, John?
So that shortfall includes schools. So the additional costs that we forecast for the year were 3.3 million, inclusive of increases within schools. The funding that we are due to receive is going to be 760,000 short of that, and will be carried as a pressure moving forward.
Yes, that was the other question. So it will effectively become a new pressure, as we move on through the medium term that we'll be looking at in a second. That will be factoring that in, but we'll pick that up in a second. In terms of grants funding, just finally, can you give us, and anybody from Monmouthshire would be interested to know how great is our dependency on grants? As a sort of ballpark figure, if you're able to do that, and if you can't do it right now, if you could possibly let us know, and we'll share that around.
Thank you, Chair. So we budget for a level of specific grants during the year. There's a nuance to this, as ever, because a lot of those will be grants that we directly passport out to other agencies, other authorities, where we're working as an agent for Welsh Government. So the best example of that would be our bus services support grants, where we act as the effective agent for Welsh Government in the region to distribute those grants. So it's quite a difficult question to answer straight off, Chair. It'll need some further clarification. So there'll be an element that will go towards supporting our budget, but there will also be an element where we effectively don't control that grant funding and it gets passported out. So I think that nuance is important for the committee, and I think it'll form the basis of any response I can give back over the coming weeks, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. I suppose just for clarification, it's to understand what's not in our core funding that could be at risk in an uncertain political future next year, decision making, policy making, just to have some understanding of what that dependency is. So it would be great to, even at a ballpark level, see what those perhaps 3 different areas look like. If you'd be able to sort of reply to that. Thank you. Great. So thank you for the questions and the answers to that. It's been some really important points. A lot of it will link directly to the next report, which is inevitable. But in the meantime, I'm going to move this report And we will indeed move on to item 5, which is the medium-term financial plan update review to the budgetary situation. And Councillor Callagher, do you want to start with comments?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present this 6-monthly update of the Council's medium-term financial plan. This report provides an important overview of our emerging financial position, updates the assumptions that underpin our planning for 2026-2027, and sets out the broader context in which next year's budget will need to be developed. This latest update projects a budget shortfall of £11.5 million for 2026-2027, with the gap rising to £37.4 million over the medium term. Although these figures remain significant, it's worth noting that they represent a modest improvement from the earlier forecast, reflecting refined inflation assumptions and updated service pressures. The financial environment in which we are operating continues to be extremely challenging. Persistent inflation, increasing service demands, and the ongoing effect of the cost of living crisis continue to shape our financial landscape. Supply chain pressures and wider economic uncertainty, driven by both national and global developments, also add to the volatility in future planning. Despite these pressures, the Council has demonstrated strong financial stewardship. Last year's budget successfully absorbed over £17 million in service pressures, and our in-year position for 2025-2026, as you've just heard, is currently more favourable than in previous years. Should that positive position be maintained to year end, it will help stabilise our reserves and strengthen our starting point as we plan for 2026-2027. However, significant risks remain, particularly around our reserve levels, increasing school deficits, and the absence of any multi-year funding certainty from Welsh Government. Updates from the forthcoming UK autumn budget and the provisional local government settlement will be crucial in shaping the next stage of our modelling. Looking forward, the scale of the financial challenge means that traditional efficiency measures will not be enough. Strategic reform, targeted savings and evidence-based prioritisation will be essential. The focus must remain on sustainability, protecting essential services, and ensuring that our community and corporate plan objectives continue to guide decision-making. This report sets the foundation for the work ahead, providing clarity on the financial gap, the assumptions that drive it, the external factors influencing our outlook, and the timetable for developing a balanced budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Callagher. Just for clarity, you're saying strategic reform is essential. Could you give an example of what that might look like?
It's our ongoing work, I would say, especially within social care. We touched earlier on the programme for change, but it's that I guess broader across the top, looking at how we deliver our services, the most efficient way to deliver our services, rather than year on year just reducing budgets. Changing the way we do business in order that the way we do business can continue into the future.
Yep, thank you. John, did you want to add any comments, and we'll open it for questions?
I think at this point, Chair, I'm happy to open to questions. It's been covered quite well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, committee members, fire away if you have any questions to raise. I see Councillor Bond first to the button.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Card and everyone. Really good to hear that you're looking at process mapping and identifying what we actually need and looking at our process and what we deliver for our customers so that we can streamline that and cut waste would be wonderful. So really good to hear. Thank you.
Great. That's it. It's that rarity, Councillor Bond, of the comment and the positive comment without a question. Thank you. It's good to hear. Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm afraid I've got some questions, which is what we're here for. On the sort of schools deficit, which is obviously we've mentioned before, and as you say, both reports link into each other, but I'd like to ask a specific question. How many schools have submitted recovery plans by October half term, and how many were returned for improvement? On the adult social care, how can we be assured that practice change savings are actually having an effect? I can't quite see how they're evidenced at the moment, but perhaps they're too new in the game. And leading on from that, how many care packages have been reduced through the review process to date? And what's there's a huge rise in residential placements, especially dementia and complex care. So what would you say the projected number of residential placements by year end and for next year, because they are obviously having a huge effect on my last question is about children's services, that the legal costs being put onto the council seem to be rising, and they're an added pressure. So what proportion of external council costs are avoidable, would you say? And what alternative legal support models have been considered? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buck. There's some really interesting questions you're raising there, and I'm sure that our colleagues and officers will want to address those. On the schools recovery plan, Will or Nikki, did you want to pick up on those? And I think it's very much, what does that look like, Nikki? What requirements, and is, in terms of being in a position from October forwards, how long have schools really got to be able to get to a position of recovery? There are quite a number of questions that stem from Councillor Buckler's points.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yes, an interesting question. So just to confirm that as of October half term, we did have all the recovery plans in place for schools that required a recovery plan. These are reviewed internally by myself and my team, and we'll then take different routes depending on the level of deficit. And I think I've explained this before in terms of where the risk is and where ultimately the recovery plans are ultimately agreed. When a plan is submitted and agreed, we will then obviously monitor that on a monthly basis, and schools will then be asked to continue to ensure that they meet their commitment within that plan. What I do accept is things will come from the left field, and schools will potentially face additional costs in year one. But then we would be asking them to look at the year 2 and year 3 to ensure that they are still meeting their recovery plans. To be clear, we don't rewrite recovery plans because they haven't met their targets.
Just if I could perhaps just probe a little further on this, Nikki, and I realise that there's only so much information you will have, but trying to understand it, and if residents are looking at this, indeed parents are looking at this, and indeed teaching staff and other staff within schools. Is there a period of time over which, rather than a single year, a recovery plan would be expected? So is that expected over, we're talking about the medium-term financial plan up to 29-30, so is that the sort of horizon that schools would normally have? And at an earlier point in the discussion, we were talking about particularly in Abergavenny and the PRS, the two specific schools where there are the highest levels of deficit. And I think Councillor Callard talked about structural, it was certainly raised as a question. Are we saying that those have structural financial challenges, or is it less than that as a challenge? But really interested just to understand this a little bit further. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll pick this up from Nikki if that's okay. So in terms of the timeline, I think what we've always sought to be is fair to our schools and recognise that where schools have incurred deficits, that's often as a consequence of increased demand, special demands that work their way through the system, and they have incurred that level in supporting learners significantly. And that's something which we've tried to be as supportive as we can have. So when, in the most extreme cases, schools meet with myself, senior finance colleagues, along with the cabinet members for finance and for education, we talk about recovery, which is both robust, so that it's happening, so that we could recognise that the changes are going to take place. We talk about recovery that's sustainable, so not just incredibly drastic kind of cuts in year 1 and year 2 that then endanger the provision and the curriculum delivery to the whole school. And we talk about doing this on a basis which gives us assurance that there is control in both the planned and the control environment within the school over time, and allows the school to recover in a way which is not impactful on what the children see and receive. Obviously, what I said earlier is that sometimes, in terms of the recovery plan delivery, there will be moments where there are staff reductions and so on, and that's unfortunate. But actually, I've always been hugely impressed by the way in which we've looked at this in a way which is as pragmatic and fair as we can be as an authority, recognising, and I'm acutely aware for both John Davis and Peter Davis in terms of the balance sheet, but the support that we're giving to schools is to allow them to recover over a period of time, which holds those two things in balance. The need for the financial discipline to come into balance, and on the other hand, the need not to provide, hugely disruptive, impactful changes on school life.
So it's not that it's a 3-year plan you're looking for specifically, Will. You're taking it, from what you're saying, more pragmatically. In some case, it might be less than that.
Yeah.
But in others, it's about working with the school and to achieve the fairest set of points, and just to understand what you're saying, to minimise impact on outcomes for pupils. If I understand correctly what you're saying. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. If we could move on to the next question, which is, I think, Jane, very much in your area, which is about practice changes that Councillor Buckler has asked, and just the impact of practice changes, and picking up also the review process that you have previously talked about, the frequency of case reviews and what progress we might be making on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The question regarding the evidence of practice change in terms of the savings that it's generated, it is quite a complex question because there are many strands of the practice change programme within adult services, and I would have to say that the emphasis on that programme within adult services is about meeting and being able to respond effectively to rising demand. So it's around curtailing costs where possible, and having, ensuring that we use our resources in the best way possible to meet the rising demand. So the change programme is, you have new demand and savings against existing demand, all happening in a very dynamic way to sort of really get the exact figure of what drops out of that in a detailed way. It's quite challenging, but of course we have got the ultimate test of the bottom line and where we are with that. What I would say is that, and it's difficult to take it in a 1 year, because actually the practice change programme for adults has been over a number of years, at least the 2 or 3 years when I've been in post, and we have been able to deliver a number of savings over that period against how we deploy our internal staff compared with the amount we commission, being able to manage, negotiate costs around commissioning, and we've been able to deliver savings by the way that we provide services. An example of that is within our learning disability services. So it's been a long-term programme, really with the emphasis of being able to respond to rising demands and ensuring that we're using our resources most effectively. In terms of the specific question around the number of care plans that have been reduced, again, sorry to not be able to give that clear-cut answer. The volume of care plans, we have around 500 plus open care plans within adult services at any one point in time. Again, that's very dynamic, and we do aim to review them on an annual basis, where that is required. Not all cases require that. And we could probably pick out, some cases where there's been a reduction, but I don't have the definitive number for that. But more often than not, needs change. So we're putting in a different care plan, or we're finding a different way of delivering the same level of care. So it's not just a straightforward question of it was once this and now it's that, and you can show that reduction. It's often a change in the way that we deliver, or in fact needs a change, so we're delivering something different. So it's quite a complex question, although on the surface level it might feel straightforward. There's so many different variables to that it is quite hard just to sort of pin down that definitive number. But what we can tell you is how many care packages have been reviewed. And as I said previously, when we do the piece of work at month 9 to really work through the detail of that for those care packages that have been reviewed this year, we should be able to allocate a number against that 250k that we put into the savings mandate. Shall I move on?
Thank you, Jane. It is I think we recognise it's a complex area, and I suppose it's a difference between the inputs and the outputs, and that might be a way of being able to assess what change in inputs that there have been. But yes, it's the rise. I'm so sorry,
Chair,
yes.
Could I just before
Please.
we move on to my last question, it sort of seems appropriate just to quiz Jane now. It's interesting what you say about how difficult it is and how care plans change and needs change, which I completely understand. How much of that process is looking holistically at the whole situation of each individual person receiving that care? Because we know it's not one element that will have an effect on how vulnerable people are and how much care they need, whether it's isolation or family circumstances, or even a way of making people feel healthier or more in control of their environment. So how much, you mentioned you do it dynamically, but how much is that part of your process? Thank you.
Jane, do you want to try and see if you can answer that one reasonably briefly? Thank you.
I'll try and do my best. Yeah, so it's a really good point. We work under the Social Services Wellbeing Act, where we're looking at the wellbeing outcomes of individuals, which are in fact holistic. So it's not just the element of formal care and support, which might have a price tag attached to it. It might be how we support the carer environment. It might be around how we connect people to local communities. It might be how we provide assistive tech or reablement. It is that holistic approach. That usually requires some level of short-term intervention in some of those cases, and then what comes out of it is a mixture of formal care and support, and knowing that we've got other things in place that try to support a person's personal well-being outcomes.
Councillor Bucker, you're content with that particular point, because it is an important one you've raised. Thank you. And we're moving on just to, I think, the question about the rise in residential and dementia cases, and then the children's services legal issues. Is there a different approach that we might be able to take?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the rise in residential placements, we really have seen that upward trend not ease back at all. We've based our current prediction on what has gone on over the last 6 months. So we've anticipated 3 placements per month in terms of the rise in provision, which is probably the most significant that it's been, certainly in my experience, tying in very much with the ageing demographic and complexity of people's needs as they age within the county. I would put a caveat around that. It's incredibly, it can be very unpredictable. It really depends. We're coming into the winter months now. What happens over winter in terms of any serious episodes of flu or other conditions that can have an impact, sadly, on people's life expectancy. So it is very unpredictable, but at the moment all we can do is predict on what's happened over the course of the year so far. So we are anticipating an ongoing rise. That is sadly the case across the UK, and we, as I emphasise, we really do try to reduce or delay people's intense support, care and support needs, but there is an inevitability within an ageing population that this high level of care and support will continue to rise.
And on the question of children's services and whether or not the approach that we take of in-house legal, if there's a different model that might be more efficient?
Thank you very much. We have in the past looked at alternative ways of ensuring that cases within the courts, family proceedings courts within children's services have the correct legal support wrapped around them. We have commissioned out in the past, but actually that drives costs even higher. We've looked at where we are able to provide our own advocacy in-house, and we're certainly open to looking at that again, which helps to avoid council costs, which are extremely costly. And the degree to which we're able to mitigate against the use of external expert reports, which again can have an impact on costs. Often those last two areas of potential cost curtailment, some of it is in our control, but not all of it. Quite often, if you've got cases who are using counsel, we are obliged to use counsel, and often expert reports will be required by the court rather than relying on internal assessments and reports and so forth. And that can be very much, what's in how the judiciary is approaching cases at particular points in time. But it's a high level of legal cost within children's services at the moment, and we would like to see that come down over the next months, which will require some detailed, in-depth analysis of where the costs are coming from, and just to see where we can look to intervene. So we've tried other models. There are local authorities who commission out entirely. It hasn't curtailed costs. Outside chance of looking at maybe how we can join up with other local authorities, but ultimately those costs are high. It's a high cost area, but we're having a closer look at that in the next 6 months.
Thank you, Jane, and of course, connected to what you're saying, where local authorities have commissioned externally when the legal service is required, it can lead to the issue of a lack of good record keeping, which can present a future problem if there's any difficulty in any individual case, having that knowledge. It's a complex area, and thank you for outlining it. Councillor Buckler, were there any brief comments you wanted to add to these latter 2 points?
You'll be glad to know not, thank you.
No, I'm not at all glad. You've asked some tremendous questions, so really grateful for them. That's been very, very helpful indeed. Thank you. I see Councillor Howells, I think, with your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on the council tax, really. So you mentioned earlier the sort of the split is 60% from Welsh Government for funding for the county, and then 40% reliant on collecting council tax. I was just wondering how this compares with the Welsh average. I understand from the report that we are the highest split. What is the national average on that ratio? I know the formula is very complex, and I understand it's on housing. Some of the formulas on housing, and will our LDP address some of those issues and increase in affordable housing? I know historically, going back to 2015, we've increased our council tax more than the national average. It would be nice if that could be addressed in some sort of way. But yeah, how do we compare against the national average on that?
Thank you, Councillor Howes. I suppose addressing the council tax increase in some sort of way, the only way is not so high as the only alternative. I suppose there are many alternatives to that. But who wants to pick that particular point up, John?
Thank you, Chair. Very roughly, off the top of my head, it's around about 70-30 in terms of that average. There's a broad spread of differences across Wales, and many factors go into to that. The reason I say roughly is it's quite a difficult measure to calculate for various reasons. I think the important thing for us as an authority is that, of course, council tax is an important consideration as part of budget setting. Maintaining support through the council tax reduction scheme is also an important facet for us, and we've been able to do that with support from Welsh Government. So, those residents who need that support can access that. I think probably the important thing to consider as well is how that has changed over time. So I think there has been a move towards council tax being more important over time for us as an authority. Whether that's and again, there's many things that sit behind that, but where council tax increases year on year are larger, that differential will become bigger. At times where that council tax increase is lower, perhaps as we saw maybe in the mid-2010s, that can have the opposite effect. So, many factors playing into that. As we look through the replacement development plan and the impact that will have for us, we will take that into account during our budget setting. There will be, as you say, degrees of bandings across those developments with affordable housing and the ratio of those across those developments. But within that, there's also multiple other factors around single person discounts, other discounts that are available for certain residents. So, quite a complex area for us to take a balanced assumption around. We tend to go on historic experience and be prudent where possible, because lots of things can have an impact. And we've seen council tax discounts and exemptions increase over recent years, particularly post-pandemic, where potentially residents' circumstances have changed. They've become available to access further discounts and exemptions that is bringing us up more towards that All Wales average in terms of where those discounts and exemptions are being made. So lots within that, I know, but I think probably in conclusion, it's a complex assumption for us to make within our modelling, and lots of things going and playing into it.
Thank you, John. Councillor Howells, any follow-up? Great, thank you. So I'm going to move to Councillor Pavia with the last question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The report states that the council is being asked to close a cumulative gap of over 37 million over 4 years, mainly through savings and service transformation. Yet last year we saw only around 80% of planned savings were actually delivered, and the report states that, I think it's at 9.2, that many services are already at the statutory minimum for delivery. So I suppose a question for the cabinet member is how are you ensuring that the savings and transformation plans over the next few years are genuinely realistic and deliverable, rather than an aspirational figure that potentially risks widening the gap when they don't materialise? As a sub-question to that, in terms of the transformational savings, what criteria are you using to decide whether a proposed transformational saving is robust enough to be built into the budget? So are we gathering, collating, analysing evidence of pilots, demand modelling, etc.? And if you are, and before you test those assumptions, before you rely on those assumptions moving forward, will Scrutiny have the opportunity to test some of those assumptions that are being looked at for transformational savings? So I hope that a positive response on that. And finally, Chair, just in relation to on the capital side, we're obviously reliant on capital receipts, including tapering use of receipts to support revenue and service change. The report states that our receipts are forecast to fall sharply. So I'm interested to know what our exit plan from that position looks like, without letting our assets deteriorate. So what is our exit strategy essentially about reducing our reliance on capital receipts and borrowing while still tackling the backlog of our assets and maintaining essential investment over the life of this MTFP? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavia. And so, Councillor Callaghan, did you want to pick up on at least the first of these?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you for the questions, Councillor Pavia. I agree with you, about the savings targets we've seen for the past 2 years. They have been challenging. You mentioned 80% in 24-25. In 25-26 so far, I think we're around 92% in achieving our savings targets. We know at the start of the year when we set our budget, it's our estimation of our spend throughout the year in many areas. It's, especially in service areas where we have a statutory duty to respond to demand. As you'll know from your time in this committee, there are areas where we see underperformance and there are areas where we see outperformance. Since I've been doing this role, we've come to the end of the year. Jonathan Davis in our finance team, we've got a very strong finance team here, and we have come to balance at the end of the year. So you're right that savings targets need to be scrutinised. Proposals need to be scrutinised. Traditionally, we've done that through the budget consultation process. It comes to this committee, it comes to Place Committee, it comes to People Committee. So members have got the opportunity to challenge the robustness of those proposals and their deliverability. That process will continue. So when we bring our budget proposals forwards for 26-27, Scrutiny Committee will have the same opportunity to challenge those proposals in order to check that they're satisfied, with their robustness and the planning and the thought that's gone into them. You'll have to remind me of the second part of your capital receipts. I might hand over to John for that. I think he's probably got more data than I have on our use of capital receipts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to maybe complete the response on the first question, Councillor, I think you referenced the longer term £37 million budget gap, and I think what the programme of change that is being developed is looking to tackle is a sustainable way to approach that. Now, there are many things that sit behind that, whether it's preventative measures and investment up front in some of those. It's whether AI can have any meaningful impact on some of our cost base and how that works through. There's a whole host of ideas that are coming forward, and we're looking to put a support around that through a strategic team to lead on that. I think inevitably that will require some upfront investment. We'd be naive to think that we can just simply carry on as we are and that will get delivered as natural course of business. That isn't the case, and from experience elsewhere, we've seen the need to invest up front. Comes back into the point earlier around our earmarked reserves and our ability to invest up front in some of those ideas to generate more medium-term either cost avoidance or savings. And cost avoidance is as important as savings as we go through this process. So I think bringing all of that into a coherent budget strategy is key for us. What we don't want to do is overcommit, because I've been party to this many times through my time with the authority, and I think what we don't want to do is just have an arbitrary target that is there, and it sets us up to fail. We need a evidence-based approach to it, as you outline, that we can work through step by step. So that is where the work continues at the moment in terms of that programme of change, and we're speaking to the various stakeholders around that at the moment. On the second point about capital receipts, again, it's a very valid point in the current climate. What we have done through our budget strategy is start to taper off the support that we are providing to the revenue budget through capitalisation direction. And that is due to taper off to zero by 2028-29. Why is that important? Well, our pool of capital receipts, as you can see in the report, is diminishing, and it has reduced the ability for the authority to put those receipts towards capital investment. That pool will be replenished at some point through the replacement local development plan, but that's work in train, and we need to work that through. You're right to highlight capital pressures as a concern for us, and work is underway to understand what those look like, both for next financial year but also over the medium term. And our infrastructure, as we've seen around some of our carriageways, our bridges, and the wider support networks within infrastructure, is probably going to be the key fundamentals in some of that. We've seen bridge closures recently. We've seen flooding events now over the weekend that plays in to all of that need for support. But bluntly, our ability to do any capital investment without recourse to borrowing is very limited. Our central core funding from Welsh Government is limited. So anything that we do over and above that has to come from borrowing. It's the very nature of the capital programme. What we need to assess is, approaching this in a way that prioritises the needs that are highest risk, and work through that methodically to ascertain whether that's affordable over the long term. But also, if we don't invest in it, will it cost us more over the long term anyway? So it's a very difficult one to answer. We rely on a lot of technical reports and surveys that need to be carried out. As you'll know, it's a very technical area. So that's where the conversations are at the moment as we go through the coming weeks on our budget development. But yeah, absolutely right to highlight that as a key risk for us as we move forward over the next couple of financial years.
Thank you, John. Councillor Pavey, you are happy with those points?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with John about particularly understanding the technicalities of the OY bridge and the structural impacts there. But I'm sure we could have another hour on this, but I'm conscious of time, Chair, and you need to move on. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and I'm sure we will have those extra hours discussing a lot of this, Councillor Pavia. You're quite right. A lot of these are in-depth issues that will need to be dealt with in in-depth discussion. But thank you for the questions and the responses. I'm going to move this report, which has been properly scrutinised, and move on to the next item, which is item number 6 on the agenda, the annual health and safety report. And welcome, Kate Thompson, and thank you for being here with us, Kate. If I could just preface, as I did at the start of the meeting, we're going to aim to bring this meeting in by midday, and we were very conscious that this report has already gone to governance and audit, and therefore our focus has been on any additional points that we thought were appropriate to raise. So I hope you wouldn't be disappointed that we don't go into every paragraph of it, but we've read it, we value it. So would you care to offer any particular points you wanted to highlight, Kate? And we can then open for questions.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. And just to confirm that the report has been brought to you today as part of our, if you like, our commitment to robust governance and transparency in managing organisational risk. So health and safety, as you'll all be aware, is a critical area of operational risk, and getting it wrong can have serious consequences for individuals and the organisation. And the report provides an overview, as you've seen, of activities, key incidents and improvement initiatives. I think the first thing to note, bearing in mind very limited time, is that there is a really positive in here, that we've got areas of real strength, and that's really good. We also recognise that we have areas where we need to make improvements. The good news is that if we look at work-related accidents and incidents, there were only 16 across the whole authority that was serious enough last year to require reporting to the Health and Safety Executive, who are our regulator, and the reporting under RIDDLE, which requires us to report certain incidents to them. And 10 of those were reported under RIDDLE by virtue only of the fact that they resulted in staff having 7 or more days off, not necessarily because of the seriousness of their injury, which is really, really good news. And, it sort of demonstrates, I think, the effective health and safety management arrangements that we have in place across most of the organisation. I think sickness absence is a standout feature in this report. The level of sickness absence is high compared with other organisations. It currently stands at around 12. I think we've got 12.68 days lost per full-time equivalent, which is really high compared with 4.4 days across the UK, which is at 5.9 if you compare just with local government. So it's a real matter of concern, and an area where we're focusing attention at the moment. HR colleagues are currently reviewing policies and processes with the aim of reducing time lost due to sickness. And of particular note, almost 30% of sickness is due to psychological illness, in which that's 10,400 more than working days lost due to psychological illness. The one thing I think, just to sort of finish off, is currently what we're not able to report is that working time lost due to work-related causes. So we don't know, for example, how much of that psychological absence is work-related stress, for example. And that's something that I'm working with HR colleagues and our systems and data colleagues to put right, because once we understand the scale of the problem and we're able to baseline stress in the organisation, then we can start planning interventions and strategies to support colleagues. Just wanted to finish off around assurance. One of our commitments this year is to prioritise the development of a risk-based, more consistent approach to health and safety monitoring and assurance. I'll be producing a report in due course with recommendations to plug any gaps. I hope you found the report helpful and sufficiently insightful, and be happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kate. And yes, and the infographics are also very good, because at the heart of this, we also want to make sure that we're putting forward reports that are accessible to our residents, or with Annette and Rim, our customers. That's it's good to see. It makes a lot of complex information very accessible. So I'm just going to open it for questions. If you could flick your microphone off, Kate, then we'll see what questions come on. Thank you very much. Any particular questions from the committee? And we're recognising it's already gone to governance and audit, so we're just seeing if there are any other additional points. So, Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kath. It's good to see that you addressed the alarming rate of our work days lost being over double that of the national average. And I was just wondering, does this compare to any other local authorities? Is this a trend that's being seen in other sort of counties? And I'd be interested to hear what more you're doing to sort of correct this figure, or illness is illness, and we have to take that on board, but it is quite a large figure by comparison. Thanks.
I suppose, Councillor Howes, the question is, as much as anything, are we more ill in Monmouthshire County Council? And that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know, Kate, could you shed any light on Councillor Howes' point?
Yeah, I can do, actually. Up until quite recently, HR colleagues were trying to get some comparative data with local authorities in Wales, and particularly around social care, and it's been very, very difficult. However, I can answer your question, because I think you probably saw last week in the news that in the headlines, our neighbouring authority was reporting just over 13 days per full-time equivalent, so, for the authority as a whole. So, that's one authority. That authority is Caerphilly. You possibly saw that in the news yourselves. So we have that information for one authority, and we're going to continue pressing to get that information on a Wales-wide basis.
Councillor Howes?
Yeah, and sorry, is there any sort of directorate that it really is being? I think I noticed that the figures on social care that was quite high, and also place was it as well. So.
Yes, that's right. And I attended Jane's DMT last week to talk to managers with HR colleagues around that data and around developing some sort of, an action plan to try and really do a deep dive on the data. That's really what's needed, Jane. I think what we agreed a deep dive on the data, and to put some action plans in place to try and reduce sickness absence.
Thanks. That's really good to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howes. It's such an important area. It's also interesting how this area is now becoming much more widely talked about at a national, UK-wide level in terms of stress-related illness and mental health issues that are seen as now part of everyday debate at a political level, a national level. So it is clearly something that is occupying more and more interest, more widely. So thanks for the question. And I see Councillor Bond with your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Kate. Really good report. Thank you very much. I'm quite surprised to find that this is the inaugural report, and the suggestion that it isn't a mature service. So I wonder how it was organised before, but you don't need to answer that now. I understand and see that the risk register is really good, and it will help longer term identify where the issues could be mitigated. I wonder when the dashboard is proposed to be shared, please, and shown to us all. And I got a little bit confused insofar as that sometimes we're talking about work-related sickness, and other times we're including people who use leisure centres or other. And I wondered what the impact is on our actual residents, and whether we also look at investigating them the same way. I'm sure we do. So that's the first question, please, whether it's including all residents using the facilities as well as our staff. And the second one, you've just alluded to it, about the matter of concern about mental health. I'm not sure that the word psychological illness is as widely used as mental health. So I don't know whether that is conjures maybe a more less direct link, but maybe I don't know whether that could be looked at, and whether that is a good way to represent it, or whether we ought to be talking directly about mental health. Do you wonder if there's any stress management courses, and whether there's stress management courses between teams and individuals, and then relating back to the workload, because we've discussed this many times about obviously cutting budgets and increasing workload on people, and actually that being a direct impact, having a direct impact on people's mental health because of workload. So I wonder how that links in, and how that links in with the managers to help them identify where there might be additional pressures on people. So there was something on page 111, or page 16, sorry. So the relaunch of the Connect 5 Wellbeing Training 2025 will empower employees. So that sounds like it's a really good training that needs to be implemented all the time, and maybe that ought to be the top point rather than talking about the cost. We should be talking about our people first, I'm suggesting. And the other area was around, so the first one is around the actual system itself and the risk assessment, and does it include residents as well? The second area is about around mental health, which you just said, and what else we're doing. And the other area, the third area, please, is around 35.5% of violence against teachers by learners. So, so we've got additional. You've been doing training for, sorry, as a council, we have been doing training for how to manage the situation, as in the recipient, the victim, as it were, but what we're doing about the root cause. So I've just been talking about previously about behaviour and helping young people regulate their behaviour. So what we're doing about the root cause to this increase in violence in schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. So, Kate, did you want to pick up those interesting questions?
Yes, I've made some notes. So the dashboard that you mentioned, that's the of performance indicators for health and safety that we're developing. So that work's in progress at the moment. That will be finished by the end of the year. There's some consultation to do around that as well. So there'll be the way that'll work is that I'll prepare a paper for our corporate health and safety group with input from directorate health and safety groups, and that will then be subject to some consultation. So by the end of the year, what I hope to have is a pretty robust dashboard that people across the organisation are happy with. In terms of accidents and impacts on residents, so the data you have in front of you, that's work-related accidents and incidents, and that's work-related as far as staff, contractors, pupils, customers using our facilities. So it's the whole range. Most of the data is staff reported illness. But work-related means that the work activity or the premises has been a contributory factor. So, for example, if a child sustained an injury playing football and in a leisure centre, and lack of supervision wasn't a contributory factor, then that would not be reported as a work-related accident, although it happened in the workplace. And I say that because it is an important distinction, and there's quite a lot of guidance produced by our regulator on that. What I say to colleagues is, if you're in any doubt, report it, and then because I look at all of these on a daily basis, they pop up on my screen, and then I classify them as either work related or not. So they're all recorded, councillor, whether they're work related or not, but the figures that you have in front of you are those that have been sifted out as work related, because they're the things that we can do something about. So that was that question. The next issue you raised was around mental health. So psychological illness is how our colleagues in HR classify it, and that includes a range. It includes anxiety, stress, depression, low mood, the whole range. So as well as sort of more, other mental health matters. So it's a wide grouping, and there's more detailed information that sits under that. If you wanted a more detailed breakdown. The next issue was around stress management courses, and I see you've picked up on the Connect 5 training, which is really, really important, and that's being rolled out at the moment in social care and Jane's Directorate, and the intention longer term is for that to be rolled out across the whole organisation, because it's really important that managers are able to recognise signs of stress in their staff. And the other thing is that we will be expecting managers to undertake stress risk assessments as well, which is really important. And there are known factors in the workplace that can contribute to work-related stress. And it is all about managers having the confidence to have sometimes difficult conversations and sometimes very sensitive conversations with staff. So that training is going to be invaluable, and longer term, as I say, that will be rolled out much wider. The other issue that you raised was around violence in schools. So I'm not best placed, Councillor, to answer questions about the root cause and the child aspect of this. My interest in this is around the staff that are affected and impacted. So we have a team in Will's Directorate that pick up on the child issues, making sure that the individual child risk assessments are in place, bringing in the right specialists to deal with and support the child. From a corporate health and safety perspective, my interest is in making sure that the staff who are affected by violence at work are given the right support, and that we have reliable data around that. We do try and join up, because sometimes there's quite grey areas, and I meet with safeguarding colleagues and colleagues in Will's Directorate every Monday. We have a touch point meeting at 9:15 to discuss some of these cases where staff have been badly hurt or injured, and making sure that the head teacher is getting the support they need, but also the member of staff. And I think that was it, actually.
I think that's it. Yeah. Councillor Bond, did you have anything briefly, if I may ask?
Yes. So just sorry to ask again, but so the recorded ones are only when you found the root causes and something to do with the establishment or the workplace itself. So just could you give me a brief example of where that isn't the case, so I can understand, please? And it's the HSE term that's mental health rather than psychological that I was taking it from, so perhaps it's different in MCC. And the other thing about the stress management, it's wider than just stress management. I was suggesting it is work planning, so really looking at working with the managers to identify the work and the increased work because of cuts in budgets have increased the stress on those people. So it was actually linking it to the work planning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So that last issue around work planning, identifying root causes in terms of stress management, those would be identified during a stress risk assessment. So just to give you your assurance, at the moment, they're not being widely carried out across the organisation. And that's where we need to, a place that we need to move to, so that we're able to recognise all the things that you've mentioned, so that's, but if we're doing stress risk assessments, I will identify things like work demands, any issues around work relationships, around sort of volumes of work. So all of those things would come out, hopefully, of a stress risk assessment, which is basically a conversation, a one-to-one conversation between the manager and an individual member of staff following a sort of a set structure. There's then an obligation to action plan around the findings of that stress risk assessment. So I hope that gives you some assurance that we are going to be moving in the right direction. We're not where we need to be at the moment, but it's all part of our action plan in reducing work-related stress. And sorry, could you just remind me of the first issue?
It was only an example because you were saying that we only see, we're not seeing the whole of incidents.
Of course.
We're just seeing the ones that work place-related?
Yeah, so if a child is playing in the playground in a school, they fall over their laces, that's recorded in the school accident book, but it's only recorded as a work-related accident if the state of the playground was a contributory factor. For example, there was a pothole which caused the child to slip. Does that answer
Thank
your
you very
question?
much. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
I hadn't even thought of potholes in school playgrounds, but that takes us into a whole new area. Finally, we've got Councillor Neil to ask a question.
Thanks, colleagues. And I forget the lady's name who was just answering Councillor Bond's questions, but thank you for those. You've covered most of what I wanted to address, actually, but psychological staff having days off for psychological health issues. It's my own opinion that we need to broaden that headline if we can. As somebody who suffers with, it's no secret, I've had clinical depression for about 20 years, adult ADHD, I was diagnosed 2 or 3 years ago. Wherever I work, I'm still going to have depression and ADHD. That's not going to change. So, but if I worked, let's say, in a factory in town, or I worked with Monmouthshire County Council, those work conditions could affect my illness or affecting days off. So I know that, it's just my view as someone who has suffered in the past with mental illness and depression, that we remove that from the psychological illnesses, because it's my own view, and there's more qualified people than myself in the chamber, but it's my opinion that the two things need to be treated separately. Whereas people with medically diagnosed illnesses are treated one way, but if there's workplace incidents that's causing anxiety, stress, all sorts of those things, they need to be dealt with. So I just wondered, as an authority moving forward, and I know you've covered most of this, is that whether we can just broaden our headline, because using the word psychological illnesses, in my opinion, doesn't look at individuals. That's putting everyone with certain types of illnesses and reasons for days off under one heading. And I just think moving forward, if Monmouthshire County Council are doing things that are causing people that having days off, then that's quite a serious thing, and we need to look at ourselves as an organisation. So just moving forward, and I'm willing to help with you guys as much as I can. What can we do to help people with these individual scenarios moving forward? And apologies, I know a lot of it's already been covered.
No, that's absolutely great. Thank you, Councillor Newell. And what I am going to say is that I think these are comments rather than questions, Kate. It's Kate Thompson, by the way, Councillor Newell, the Corporate Health and Safety Manager. And they're very relevant, comments, and your experience makes them particularly so. I was going to suggest that you might want to have a separate bit of dialogue with Kate beyond this meeting, and to try and just see whether there's an improved way in which we can actually identify how we do focus on those issues that you're raising. This is more of it's a somewhat different kind of report, and I think what you're moving into is really the pragmatic and the practical way in which we as an authority might be able to approach this. Kate, would that be okay for you?
Absolutely. I think it would be quite useful, actually, Matt to come in here, because obviously Matt manages our HR function. And I think probably, Matt, you just got a few comments that you probably like to make on this.
Sure. Yeah. I don't want to go down too deeply into a rabbit hole in this. It's a very important one, but I think some of this will need to be in a follow-up discussion. But Matt, yes, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor Neil. Yeah, as you suggest, I'm very conscious of time, given where we are on the agenda, and I really appreciate sort of Councillor Neil's candidness in this, and very keen to pick up a further conversation. What I just would like to stress is that every case is looked at individual. Every single one of our employees is an individual with their own life experiences, background, health conditions, and there's a whole wealth of sort of reporting and information that sits under this high level data. And just to give one which actually I received during the course of the meeting, one of the things Kate referred to, we now have those additional categories for separate out sort of home or personal factors versus the workplace ones. And hot off the press, sort of the first report on those reveals, I'm talking in sort of big handfuls here, but roughly sort of 20% of that stress is workplace stress. Around 10% is a combination of workplace and home, and sort of 70% is factors outside the workplace. But what I would like to do, Councillor Neil, if this is all right with you, and particularly given the complexity of this topic, would be to pick up a conversation separately and take you up on that offer for further conversation.
Thank you, Matt. And Councillor Neil, would you be happy to do that? Because, you know, your candour in this and experience in it could be invaluable if you are able to have that conversation moving forward.
Absolutely happy for colleagues to reach out there. And thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, Kate. Thanks for the questions to committee members, and Kate for sitting in the meeting. I hope you find the earlier part of the meeting also interesting. We're going to move this report, and appreciate, you know, you're taking us through it. I'm going to move on to the item number 7, which is the social services complaints process. And as I've mentioned a little earlier, we're looking to actually be pretty brief in these last 2 reports. But welcome Annette Evans as the Customer Relations Manager. We don't see the term customer used a great deal around the authority, so it's actually very good to see that. Thank you for joining us. So, did you want to take us through any key highlights from the report, Annette, and then we'll see what questions there might be.
Yes.
Yeah, if you just is it coming on?
Yes, I think it is now. Yes. Well, I just wanted just to highlight to you really that this is a statutory requirement to have a social services complaints procedure. You know, we have 2 stages to our procedure, and then if customers are not happy, they can go on to the Ombudsman. So this report covers the complaints and comments and compliments that we received between April 24 and March 25. We always try and resolve complaints at that lowest level as much as possible. And bearing in mind we had 50 complaints in total about social services, 22 complaints were in relation to adult services and 28 complaints to children's services. And out of those adult services, 19 stage 1 complaints, 16 of those, that's 80% of them, were resolved. And with children's services, we had 28 complaints and 17 of those were resolved at that first level of the complaints process. As well as the complaints, we also record comments, and comments are dealt with in the same way as complaints. This is because people don't want to go through a formal process of making a complaint, but they do want to let us know about an issue that they wish to raise. So we follow through with comments in the same way as we do for complaints. And we had 75 comments for adult services and 17 for children's services. As well as that, we do record compliments because it's important that when people take the time to contact us to say that they were really pleased with the service or a member of staff who helped them, you know, we record those and we make sure the service or the staff member is made aware of the compliments that's received. The main issues with complaints that we get most years is communication. That remains sort of a theme throughout our complaints. And as I said, most complaints are resolved at stage 1. Stage 2 cases are much more complex, and they take some time to investigate. We have a timescale of 25 working days. All of our stage 2s go over that timescale because of the complexities of the matters involved. However, for stage 1 complaints, 65% were dealt with within the 17 working days timescale. And like I said, all the stage 2s, they did exceed that timescale. But when we exceed that timescale, it's also in agreement with the complainants. So that's just a quick overview of the process.
Okay, and thank you. Thanks very much, Annette, for taking us through that. And I'm just going to open it to any questions that we might have. And Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for explaining this, the sort of breakdown of the sort of 100%, missing the 25-day target on stage 2 because of complexity. Do you think that the statutory 25-day period, which is obviously a legal statutory limit, is reasonable? Because it's sort of it could be concerning that it's not being reached. So what's driving these delays? You mentioned complexity, but is it capacity, supervision of the complaints, or workflow issues? Be good to know. I know we're short on time, and I'm as keen as anyone to see this ending on time. I'm very cold in my drying out floors. I have to say, it's like being in a fridge at home at the moment because of flooding. You mentioned very clearly poor communication is a recurrent and consistent theme. So why are we not seeing improvement in that? Because obviously poor communication is vital for people to understanding what's happening. Several upheld or partially upheld complaints relate to inaccurate assessments, procedural failures, or unclear information. So sort of what are we putting in place to help with resolve these things? And you highlight learning actions, but they seem similar to previous years. And how are you, as a service, ensuring that learning from complaints results in measurable change rather than repeated commitments to change? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckler. Annette.
Yes, with regard to your first point about the 25 working days, yes, we have made, in Wales, we have an All Wales Complaints Officer group, and we have raised this as a group with the Welsh Government to say that 25 working days, is such a short time scale, because by the time that because with social services complaints, at the formal stage, we have to engage an external independent person to investigate the complaint. And therefore, by the time that we commission that person, as well, and in children's services, we have to have an independent person as well as the investigator. So when we engage those people, then they have to meet with the complainant to discuss their complaint. So it depends on availability of the complainant. And then after that, then they have to agree exactly what they're going to investigate. And so therefore there's time taken with email exchange, perhaps another visit with the complainant to agree exactly what they're investigating and what outcome they want to see as a result of raising the complaint. Then after that, the investigating officer will need to interview the relevant staff, and therefore there could well be issues with staff availability. They will need to look at file records, and then they have to prepare their response. The response comes back to us in the authority, and then it is for Jane Rogers as the strategic director to respond to the report's findings, and also to say what we're going to do as a result of what's been raised and any recommendations that have been made. So that 25 working day timescale is very tight. And because of the complexities of the complaints, because some complaints, there could be about 20 elements in there. So they do take a long time to investigate. So yes, the 25 working day timescale is very difficult to meet. With regard to your point about the poor communication, a lot of people who come to us who want to make a complaint, they're upset, they're distressed, and often perhaps, they want to keep contacting us all the time. They ring in, or they want the social workers. They have questions to ask them, etc. Well, the social workers might not always be available. We might not always be on tap to answer, any queries that they have. It could well be issues, about they've left messages and then the messages haven't been picked up, or perhaps workers have said that they will ring back at a particular time or date, and for other reasons they haven't been able to do that. So that's where communication issues come in, and with workers' capacity, especially with social workers when they're out and about all the time, that is a factor with not being able to get back to people as quickly as perhaps they would like. With regard to your point about the inaccurate assessments and what's been put in place, well, that is the complainant's view of the problem. It may not be the worker's view of the problem. I don't know whether you want to say anything about that, Jane? No? That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ines. And I think it's right to point out that particularly the stage 2 complaints, which are fewer but often more complicated, and with families who certainly in children's services are already in, I would like to use the term adversarial sort of relationship with the council, but we're in formal or statutory processes regarding child protection, the child protection framework. So it is quite a hotbed really for not quite seeing eye to eye in terms of some of the assessment information we might be providing and some of the way that the families might see it. Nevertheless, some of the complaints do, and I have to say also, because I know every stage 2 complaints in a fair amount of detail. I read the reports really carefully, and I do very considered responses when we get the outcomes of the stage 2 to the complainants. And there is often a mixture of very frustrating, some, I'd say, minor inaccuracies, spellings, or not quite getting the chronology right, or not quite understanding the family, not the chronology, but the way that the family's made up, details that we should and could get right. But that is quite often then juxtaposed with matters of opinion and professional judgment, which are called into question. Sometimes it's about really disentangling the two. With the first, it is frustrating that we don't always get the 100% accuracy that we aim for, or the really good, well quality assured reports. But within the child protection framework, we're often working within very tight deadlines, particularly when we're trying to get the reports out for the parents to review before any particular meeting. So it's something that we do try and get right, but it's sometimes rather in challenging circumstances. That's not an excuse. We really do want to get really well written, accurate reports, but it's often in quite a challenging operating context.
Wow, that was a good conclusion. Suddenly hit the button. Okay, thanks very much, Jane. And just to make sure that we've covered the points, I don't want to prolong that discussion, but was there any particular point, Councillor Buckler, that you wanted to add?
Can I just say thank you so much for giving such a good answer to my questions, because it gives everyone, the public as well, a really good overview on how difficult this service is. So thank you very much.
It's a great point, and I think that comes out very strongly. None of it's very straightforward, so thank you. Over to, I'm going to just pick up questions remaining from Councillor Pavia and Councillor Bond. If I could please ask you to be brief, because we're trying to see if we can bring this meeting to a close imminently. So, Councillor Pavia?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm curious to explore the voice of children and young people, and I could see from the report there was no complaints made directly by young people this year, and only 2 came via NIAS, the National Youth Advocacy Service. So I don't know whether it's for Annette or Jane to pick this up, but how confident are you that children and young people actually know how to complain and feel safe to do so? What specific work is being done in schools, settings that support children looked after population with youth services to promote the How to Be Heard leaflet and the complaints process in a child-friendly way? And how do you test in practice that the young people who are already engaged in our services understand their rights to complain and can access independent advocacy easily and quickly? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavia. I don't know if Jane or if Annette wants to come in first on that.
I'll come in. Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry about the last question and the abrupt end. I was just thinking I was going down a sort of a pathway of detailed practice issues that probably wasn't appropriate.
It's a lesson to all of us.
So thank you, Councillor Pavia. Really important questions. For children looked after and for children going through child protection processes, we make an active offer of advocacy within the service, and that is a piece of data that we record when an active offer is made. We capture that on the system to make sure that we really do make that active offer. But of course, issue-based advocacy is available for children at any point within their process. That's if they've got a particular issue that they want to be addressed through advocacy. It's not at the beginning of it. It's not when you make the active offer. It's through the casework. And all our children's social workers are aware of advocacy. And when they do get into that potentially conflicting sort of situation with a child, we actively consider whether advocacy might be a good avenue, with the child to see whether that is, a good avenue to really help the situation resolve. We've got really close working relationships with NIAS, our advocacy provider. A representative from NIAS sits on our corporate parenting panel and provides a quarterly report on their activity to us as well. I'd say that underneath that, we really value in the service encouraging and promoting social workers to build up really good working relationships with their children, so that if there are tensions, issues, they can really be explored and the children feel comfortable coming forward to their social workers if they're not happy with something. It's one of our key values within the service, and it's positive in a way that children aren't making those direct complaints, but we do want to make sure that if a complaint is to be made, it does come forward, and it's something we do actively promote. think that was the answer.
Yeah. It was, whether or not we're testing out.
I mean, I suppose maybe one of the, tasks is that we do on occasions have NIAS come forward to make complaints. We certainly get more complaints from parents than we do from children, and maybe that is testimony to the fact that, where children speak to us, we really try and respond and listen.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Does do lack of or do fewer complaints refer to something other than actually quite good service or very good service? It's an interesting balancing act. Thank you for that, and I'm just going to ask Councillor Bond a final question.
Okay, really quickly. I missed it. I may have missed it, but I don't think I did. Do we relate our performance to any other local authorities? And are there too many variables, perhaps, for that to be meaningful? I don't know. But at least do we benchmark against our performance with other local authorities and learn from their approaches to, for example, improving communication or any other issues that might be found? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question that we should always be aware of. And Jane, did you want to give a response on that? Annette?
Yes, we have, like I said earlier, we have an All Wales Complaints Officer group, and we meet quarterly. We also have a representative there from the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales office. And we do talk about our complaints. We do talk about the sorts of complaints that we get, and how we deal with those complaints as well. And with the Ombudsman's office, we have to provide them on a quarterly basis statistics on adult services complaints, children's services complaints, whether they were resolved, whether they went on to stage 2, all sorts of information we have to provide them with. And then they publish that data on their website. So that gives, anybody can go on their website and they can see, the sorts of issues that every authority in Wales is dealing with, and the amount of complaints that they receive.
Thank you, Annette. Brilliant. I just wondered if we could have a little bit of that in this report for ourselves and for residents to look at. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, great point, Councillor Bond. Thank you, and thanks, Annette. It's information that's there. Let's just make sure we include it. That's very helpful. Okay, thank you for the questions and the responses. And I'm going to move the report on social services complaints process. And thank you, Annette, for joining us at the meeting, and all the very best in dealing with hopefully fewer and fewer complaints. It would be an ideal world to move into. And then to move forward with the agenda, I draw your attention to item 8, which is an additional report to note, which is on socially responsible procurement strategy update. And we have had a couple of questions, Robert, which will be responded to in the appropriate way. Move on to the item 9. Robert, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, just to clarify, yes, we have received questions from members in the pre-meeting, and those will be sent to the appropriate officers for responses to then be sent back to the committee and followed up on our action list subsequently, as with any other question that's taken away from the meeting today.
Great, thank you. And item 9, Council and Cabinet Work Plan, as ever, just draw your attention to it and to remind...
Sorry.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you very much. Improvements to the table is brilliant. Thank you very much. I wondered if we can get some more information about what panel performance assessment is on there. I had looked through and I don't know what it is. Please, could we have something shared about whether that is something we might want to scrutinise?
Let's see if we can do that right now. Matt, are you able to clarify that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Bond. The very short answer, panel performance assessment is part of the performance management responsibilities placed on local authorities under the Local Government and Elections Act 2021. There is a report being taken to Cabinet next month. Governance and Audit Committee have a formal role in that process. So we've suggested a report into the agenda of Governance and Audit Committee, which we can make sure is available to all members of this committee for information, to make sure you're fully abreast of that.
Could you explain what it is, please, Matt?
Yes, certainly. So the panel performance assessment, once every 5 years, there's a requirement placed on local authorities in Wales to appoint an independent chair and a panel of peers to look at the effectiveness of our arrangements. And that supplements the annual self-assessment which is carried out by the authority each year. So that it's a new process. It's the first time Monmouthshire County Council will have gone through this, but it will become a regular part of our performance management arrangements from that point onwards. And ours is scheduled for February of 2026.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt, for that bit of perspicuity towards the end of the meeting. That's very helpful. And thank you also, Councillor Bond. Appreciate your looking at the forward plan. I was just in the process of saying, to committee members, please do look at it. And in terms of the months ahead, because we can't cram everything into the immediate future, but in planning ahead, if there are issues that we want to raise, that's where we can do so. Councillor Bond, have you got your hand up again, or is that legacy?
It's for item 10, thank you.
Right, I'm now going to move on to item 10. So just basically the work plan and action list, and Councillor Bond?
So I've raised again about the future grants process, for grants allocation process. And if you remember, this arises from the call-in that happened in March, and we've got some SPF money remaining apparently, and the Pride in Place and Impact Fund is coming very soon. So we were going to look at the process by which we identify the projects and make it as transparent as possible. Councillor Griffiths thought that as it's not our process, or at least the SPF wasn't, that it wouldn't be relevant. But I would suggest that as we are part of that process, that we need to see that our process runs successfully and it's not flawed as might have been previously. So really questions are, when does the community discussion start, and when is the process starting, and when do we have to look at the process, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And Robert, is that something that you want to comment on now, or do you want to arrange a response on that?
Yeah, just to say, we'll take that away, Councillor Bond, because there are ongoing discussions about grants and how and when we can bring them to the committee, because I know it's something that's been raised a number of times. So we are in the process of trying to arrange that, but I can add those specifics.
I think Councillor Bond's point was also that this was raised as part of the call-in going back to, I think it was February.
Yeah.
And, we're now approaching December. So if we could pass on the need for some urgency onto that, Robert, that would be very
certainly. Yeah.
Because, Chair, sorry, so because the process is starting again now, so we'll miss out again if we don't look at it now. Thank you.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bond, for making that observation. Appreciate it. Yes, please, Robert, you wanted to comment on the forward plan?
Yeah, sorry, if members don't have anything else. Just a few things. In particular, there are education items going to People Committee on the 21st of January. So the suggestion would be to invite members from this committee to that as well. So that's potentially school examination, school examination results, elective home education, and attendance and children missing education policy. So you'll receive an invitation in due course to that people meeting. Just to note, on the action list, there has been a response to the first item on it. Has been sent to the members since this agenda was published. And just to note that contrary to today's meeting, henceforth we really are going to try to only have 2 substantive items on each agenda and utilise the additional business. Though itself, we will be very careful not to put too many reports under additional business, because that you still have to read those anyway, so it still becomes a lot of work. So we're going to try to limit the 2 and really try to control things in that way. Also, we had a request as to whether members would want to have a 6-monthly update on the risk assessment report. I mean, that's something just to think about. Don't have to get a yes or no now. And again, that can always go under additional business given any other items that are on agendas in that 6 monthly stage.
Good. I think that would be the way to deal with it. I'm just going to move us on to the final issue of the minutes and confirming those. I see no corrections or additions from anyone, so therefore they are confirmed, and I'll close the meeting at that point. Thank you, everybody, for helping to work with this. I have failed miserably in my effort to bring it in by midday, despite everyone else's best efforts. But you've done very, very well to go through an awful lot in 2.5 hours, so appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Callard, for staying with the pace of the meeting as well. I know you've got a lot of calling in your time, and for all the officers and chief officers involved. So thanks very much indeed, and we'll close the meeting now.
Thank you, Chair.